Breaking It Down with Frank MacKay. This is 103.9 LI News Radio.
I'd like to welcome everyone to Breaking It Down. Our very special guest today is a wonderful actor, Patrick Clarke. Brian, how are you?
I am great. Thank you, Frank. And that's, it's nice of you to say wonderful. Now, let me ask you, do you ever introduce a guest? Let me try that in English.
Yeah.
As opposed to a desk. Maybe I'm as animated as a desk at times, and that's what the confusion is. But do you ever introduce a guest as something other than wonderful?
Yeah.
Like, I got a real schmuck here, but what the hell, we're going to give him some time anyway.
Yeah, right. That wouldn't be likely. But, every once, if we don't say anything, if we say, just an actor, something like that,
yeah.
maybe that speaks volumes.
You've learned one of the tricks of the trade, and that is this. Actors, and actors, first, if I might say, I've always felt that actors are a contradiction in personality needs. One, a desperate need for mass approval. Okay?
Why is that? That's insecurity?
Yeah. Horrible insecurities seeking mass affirmation. But then the juxtaposition is an ego so big that somehow it actually believes people are interested in whatever it may be that they're doing or saying. So, you deal with that. And consequently, because of the ego component, it's always an awkward thing if somebody tells you, hey, I'm going to be on such and such, be sure to watch. And you have no way to get around the fact that you're now stuck watching. And so what the hell do you say if you really didn't like their work? It's one thing if the project stunk. I've had enough of those. The project stunk, but the work wasn't bad. And so you can say, hey, man, I don't know that the project served you well. Hope you got paid well. And you were terrific. That's wonderful. But the instance where you watched the show and the friend who's insisted that you have to watch their work was really not, lighting the place up. And the way to deal with that is you cut them off at the pass. You don't give them an opportunity to say, so what did you think? You just catch them very quickly and go, hey, I watched the show. And if you say it with enough enthusiasm, generally the actor's ego will take over and they'll run with it.
Well, that's interesting. But one thing I've always felt, and just a reminder, Patrick Clarke has been on General Hospital, 8 is Enough, all types of shows over the Delta House, many popular shows, and he really is a wonderful actor. He's being modest here. But one thing, Brian, that I always tell bands, and I worked with a lot of bands and I managed bands, I always said to them, especially unsigned bands, never ask your friends who came to see you, what did you think? Because that is giving them an opportunity to take it out on you, whatever is going on in her life. Maybe her boyfriend broke up with her, or this guy's girlfriend cheated on him, or the boss was being mean, and you're saying, what do you think? Because really, What does it matter what they think? You know what I mean? It's, in your case, for example, you were on General Hospital for a couple of years, right? And
absolutely.
And you were a very, very popular character on that show, and it was still an extraordinarily popular show. And even the reruns have fan pages and all types.
Yeah, it is. It's shocking, frankly.
It's amazing.
No pun intended on the Frankie. I'm sure it's not the first time you've heard that one.
No, I've heard that a few times too. But
okay.
while you were shooting the show,
yes.
what came to mind when you got the role? Was it like, well, this is good because this will be work for a little while, or you thinking?
Well,
go ahead.
It was a couple of things came to mind. Number one, I'd been offered a role on the show just about 2 years earlier, and I won't say what character, but it was a popular character that went on and had success in the hands of another actor, and I don't know that the other actor even knows I was offered the role, but I passed on it, and I passed on it because ABC. Basically, I was offered two things at the same time, and that was as 8 is Enough was winding down in '81, and I had an opportunity to go to General Hospital, which, was a calculated risk because at the time, actors were not supposed to go from prime time to daytime, especially if they theoretically are early in their careers and on what we hope will be an ascent. But there was another, component, and that was that I was offered a pilot that was going to be the last show jointly done by Aaron Spelling and and Leonard Goldberg, a Spelling Goldberg production. And they'd had so many huge hits through the years that when Spelling Goldberg wanted me enough that they doubled my salary off of 8 is Enough, that they did incredible manipulations in order to get the shooting schedule worked out, an overlap between my last week on 8 is Enough as the show's winding down toward cancellation, and the first of 4 weeks shooting on a pilot called The Protectors. So I had this option. Do I go with the Spelling Goldberg and get double my salary and Aaron telling me what a huge star I'm going to be? Or do I go with, an existing huge phenomenon already? It wasn't quite yet wedding time because it was, February, March of 81, and I think the wedding was the fall of 81, but Luke and Laura had taken off like skyrockets, and you got Elizabeth Taylor's interest, and you've got this incredible fan base, and you go, okay, so one is Aaron Spelling, and it'll run, Aaron Spelling and keep a show on the air 4, 5, 6 years, and the other is going to run in perpetuity, so which is the better hand to play? And I went with the Spelling Goldberg production, pilot called The Protectors, and thought I'd made a really wise call, as it doesn't get picked up for fall, but they buy your option when they hire you for the pilot. They buy your option for 2 selling seasons. So that summer, I'm actually offered a couple of on-air series to be added to, and I can't get out of the option. ABC won't let me out of the option. And finally, in November of 81, so we're talking now, 7 months later, after the April conclusion of production on The Protectors, I hire a new manager, and she's been around the business for a while. A gal named Jan McCormick. She at the time was managing Susan Hubley and David Hasselhoff and Tim Reed and Brenda Vaccaro, and anyway, she had a lot of inroads. She knew a lot of people, and she says to me, "So what's happening with The Protectors?" I said, "Jan, I have no idea. My agent's called several times with other opportunities, and they won't let me out of the option. And I guess it's going as a mid-season replacement, but I have no substantive idea." She said, "Let me make some phone calls, and we'll find out." She calls me later that afternoon. She goes, "Baby, I got some bad news for you. It's going the series, but you're not going with it."
Wow. Yeah.
A week later, a show called T.J. Hooker goes into production. Absent me, my wife on the show, Deborah Shelton, who was later Mandy on Dallas. Absent Kelly Harmon. Absent Richard Lawson. Okay? The group of us, it was originally the concept of The Protectors was The Rookies Meets Dallas, kind of a cop soap opera. And then we were going to have this senior kind of gruff street cop as our sergeant mentor. And that, of course, was Sergeant T.J. Hooker. Well, somewhere along the way, in the course of those 6 or 7 months, and I'm not going to say who, but the guy's ego is well enough known, somewhere along the way, the show morphs from a group of cops led by to front and center TJ, and they keep one guy from the pilot, that's Adrian Zemed, and they add a scene at the end of this 90-minute pilot where suddenly, and none of us except for Adrian Zemed are in this line as he's walking the graduation line at LAPD, and as he goes down the line, he suddenly stops at Adrian Zemed and says, "Romano, you're with me." That's how they introduce this new concept. So I know it's a long-winded answer to a pretty simple question, but I actually did make a decision 2 years earlier. It had worked out as an epic fail. Oh, hey, that's great, man. I got paid really well for 4 weeks, and then I got stiffed for 2 opportunities the summer of 81. And then I found out, and to this day, by the way, I'm not expecting a phone call from Aaron. He's dead.
Right.
And I'm not sure about Leonard. He may be dead also.
Right.
To this day, the people who loved me so much, and I don't know where Rick Husky is in the scheme of things, and frankly, I don't really care.
Who is Rick Husky?
I could IMDb it if I wanted to.
Who's
but
Rick Husky?
Went on and produced a number of shows very successfully. I can remember Rick Husky telling me how excited his wife, Kevin, was that I was going to be part of The Protectors. So it was a good lesson learned, I guess. You got an awful lot of people blowing smoke up your butt when they want something in Hollywood. But don't stand around counting on any of them to be there allied with you if they deem a shift in the winds. So now, 2 years later, the opportunity comes along to join General Hospital. Gloria actually wants to test me now. She wants to test me as Jimmy Lee Holt. And I do the test, and I tested, ironically, the same day as Steve Bond and a few other folks. And I thought it went well. We get a phone call from Gloria the next day, and I've hired this manager, Jan McCormick, and she gets a phone call from Gloria, and Gloria says, listen, I'm hiring Brian, but I'm not hiring him as Jimmy Lee Holt. I've had an idea for 2 years, and I've been looking for an actor who I think can pull this thing off, and I can't tell you what it is, but it's going to be a really exciting opportunity for him, and here's the bottom line. The Jimmy Lee Holt character is actually already, the Bible is written for the next 3 to 6 months. The character is sketched in. We know where we're going with Jimmy Lee. And so, we're still, testing people. Steve ultimately, of course, got hired. We're still testing some people we want to see on screen. But, Brian will not begin work and this was November of 82. Brian won't begin working until probably late January of 83. But it's going to be an exciting opportunity. So, at that juncture in time, taking the word of Gloria Monty was kind of like, you can take this to the bank. And I had no idea what it was going to be. And that's why, actually, it was originally incredibly frustrating. Because the original Grant Putnam, who became Grant Andrews, to me, was a stiff, man. He was a stiff. He's walking around being Mr. Good Guy Doctor, and he's got this fiancée, Celia Quartermain, who's running all over town with Jimmy Lee Holt and kind of rubbing his nose in it because it's so high profile.
But still popular,
right? I can't understand why. I'm thinking, Gloria, you hired me for a reason. Why in God's name am I letting this stuff go on right underneath my nose? And I don't confront this guy. And I don't confront her. And all I kept getting from Gloria Monty was, trust me, baby. Trust me, baby. And I kept having echoes of Tim Matheson in Animal House saying, trust me. I'm thinking, oh, those words, that's death. That's death.
Hey, let me jump in for a second. Hold on. Let me just remind everyone that you're listening to Brian Patrick Clarke. He's a wonderful actor. He's done all types of work, General Hospital and 8 is Enough. And he's worked with, as you just heard, Aaron Spelling and the late Aaron Spelling, I should say, and all types of people over the years. Go ahead, finish your thought.
Yes. Well, thank you, Frank. And anyway, I can't figure out what the hell is going on with this situation. I'm so bland. I mean, I really am. I'm like vanilla ice cream, and it's not even like French vanilla. It's just vanilla, and it only begins to make sense when suddenly I get a script one day and there's a scene where it's dimly lit, it's at the hospital, and we see Grant Putnam sitting at a desk with a phone in hand and simply saying, yes, Gregory. I understand, Gregory. Yes, I understand, Gregory. Hanging up the phone and then ambiguously looking off. And it's like, now what the hell's that all about? Well, that was the beginning of tipping the fact that, in fact, Grant Putnam is a guy named, we'll come to know later, Andre Chernin, who 8 years before has had plastic surgery to take the place of the real Grant Putnam. And it was the beginning of what became a really exciting run and a couple of really exciting storylines. I mean, the Prometheus disc was incredible fun and an incredible opportunity to work with some really wonderful actors. And then the dual Grants was initially like, you're kidding, right? There's going to be 2 of us? Oh, come on. This is like, there's Kathy who's been most everywhere from Zanzibar. And I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but I can definitely hear the greater New York inflections in your speaking. So that, of course, was the Patty Duke show.
Yeah, I know the Patty.
And you had Kathy and Patty, but they're cousins. And I almost thought, wow, is this like going to be the ultimate in daytime cornball or what? But Gloria, she trusted. She went with it. I think there was initially a certain measure of skepticism in the audience, like, oh, come on. So Luke and Laura went off into the sunset, and now we got a second Grant? What? Yeah, you're right, and we're supposed to watch this? But after an initial stumbling out of the gates, people did buy into it, and I thank God that they did. And they actually, most gratifyingly, came to see the two characters as two different people. And a lot of that was a consequence of obviously writers and directors and Gloria at the helm.
Well, give yourself some credit there. I mean, that takes some acting.
Well, thank you. I mean, sure, okay.
Hey, by the way,
ultimately interpreting.
Let me remind. Wait.
I didn't create it.
Let me just remind everyone. I don't mean to cut you off. I'm interested in hearing all of this. But Patrick Clarke is our very special guest today. And if you're just tuning in, Brian's a wonderful actor from General Hospital, 8 is Enough, Delta House, all types of work over the years. Go ahead, Brian.
Well, and you know, it initially, as I said, there was skepticism. There was like, whoa, my God, General Hospital's really grabbing at straws here. They lost Tony, and Jeannie came back just long enough to take Tony off into the sunset, and now they're going to have 2 grants. And thank goodness, because Gloria, she warned me. So she said there's going to be, you know, an initial resistance, but again, trust me. And I did learn through time that I could trust Gloria Monty. Gloria could be a very, very tough taskmaster. Gloria was an interesting combination of the carrot and the stick, and you were never quite sure which you were going to get. But in deference to, and R.I.P. Gloria, in deference to a visionary, a bona fide genius, a woman who changed the entire face of daytime television, a woman who took a show that at the point at which she took it, it had been on the air, I think it was 16 years. They had a 6-month cancellation notice hanging over her head when she took the show on as exec producer. And basically it was like, you either turn this thing into a profit-making venture or it's gone. And she changed everything. She changed the tempo. She changed the notion of shooting exclusively in a studio. It was like she who took it outdoors and opened up with what we'd call remotes. And even, you know, I can remember early on, because I didn't come from a soap opera background, and historically the trend was you do daytime and then you do primetime, you know, or you do films. You don't do what I've done. I've done a couple of series as a regular, and now all of a sudden I'm going to daytime? What the hell's that all about? Well, I was really dreadful, I believe, at least once, and probably more than once. And in notes, when she called me together with whoever, you know, the castmates in the scenes were, and she said, "Baby, you're being so soap operatic." And a part of me is thinking, "But wait a second, isn't this a soap opera?" And that was the very thing she didn't want. If she liked your work, she not only wanted things to flow and things to overlap, and obviously there were accommodations for camera, and you know, you're only running cameras as you probably know, you might be shooting with 3 to 5 cameras, but you're only running one of them to tape. You know, it's a problem. Because if it's not happening on the one with the red light, it's technically not happening for the audience. So there are elements where she didn't want undue overlapping. She didn't want undue improvisation. But she was very, very good about it. If she liked your work, if she trusted your work, she wanted you to run with it a little bit. Even when you knew the dialogue and knew it with certainty and absolute certainty, it's like, okay, I can do this thing word for word, that's fine. I'm not trying to offend any writers here. She wanted you thinking on your feet. She wanted to know that the actor was not just by rote reciting words or reading a teleprompter. And I've got to at least defend myself with this. I never once went to a teleprompter. I did many times feel like I was, especially with the 2 grants, I felt like I was close to a breakdown.
Well, other people working with teleprompters at the time?
Yes, there were. And she used to at times threaten to remove the teleprompters, and at times I wished she had, but I was lucky. The people I worked with did not depend on teleprompters. There were a couple of people who, again, they'll remain nameless. It's not important, but it was just lazy acting. It was, you know what, you're being paid well to do a job. For God's sakes, at the very least, learn your dialogue, you know? Learn your dialogue. I mean, that famous moment in Tootsie, and of course, Dustin Hoffman had prepped in part by coming and spending time at General Hospital before I got there. But, you know, that famous scene where the Dustin Hoffman character grabs the older actor and turns his face to her and says, "Look at me when I'm speaking to you."
Right.
You know, it was very unsettling when you're trying to connect with somebody else in a scene and they're busy staring downstage off, to the side, trying to pick up their next piece of dialogue. It's like, dude, come on. You're doing a job that's not that damn difficult. There are people really eking by and taking on laborious tasks that are the ultimate in drudgery, and you can't learn a few words on a page.
Well, hey, let me jump in.
Offensive.
Let me jump in there for 1 second. Brian Patrick Clarke is our special guest. We have about 2 minutes left in the segment. Do we have you for another segment?
Sure, absolutely, Frank.
All right, great. I appreciate it. Brian Patrick Clarke. Speaking primarily about General Hospital here, he played a very popular character, or a couple of characters, I should say, Grant Putnam in the dueling Grants. And I unfortunately am not somebody who witnessed much of this, but I have dear friends who have, and the General Hospital fans out there certainly are interested. And we got about a minute left before the break, and we'll take a quick break and come right back with Brian. And when you mention, and again, keep in mind we got about a minute left before the break. When you when you mention the teleprompters and everything else, let's keep in mind that they're shooting 5 shows. Well, I mean, I don't know what the shooting schedule was, but I mean, you're talking about an everyday situation. In short, what was the shooting schedule like when you were doing this?
Basically, you're shooting a show a day, 5 days a week. In fact, for a period of time, we were doing one Saturday a month to get ahead of 4 weeks of scheduling where they were going to need our crew for the '84 Olympic coverage. But you're doing a show. You're doing 260 shows a year, and it's a 1-hour show. So it was 47 minutes of television every single day that you're shooting. It is a heavy workload, no question about it.
Let's take a quick break right here, and we'll be back with Brian Patrick Clarke. And when we come back, we'll continue on.
Breaking It Down with Frank MacKay. This is 103.9 LI News Radio.
And we're back with Breaking It Down. Today we're breaking it down with Brian Patrick Clarke, who is an actor, a wonderful actor. I almost stopped saying that because you corrected me on that.
No, I didn't correct you. I busted your chops a little bit. I apologize. But it was very gracious of you to introduce me as such. But then again, it was kind of like, it'd be interesting.
Yeah, we don't do that to everyone.
Got a guest coming up who really stinks to high heaven, but we're going to have him on anyway.
We're speaking with a horrible actor today.
There you go. I like it. I like it, man.
Yeah, but anyway, a wonderful actor. And let's talk about, we were talking quite a bit about General Hospital, but 8 is Enough was also a very popular show. And
yes.
And you came on as Merle the Pearl. And who were you married to? Who was your...
I was married to Susan, who was played by Susan Richardson. Made it easy. I was never going to forget the character's name because as long as I could remember the actress's name, I was good to go.
Yeah. How were those guys to work with? Was that a dysfunctional family over there?
I think now it's safe to say the truth is out, and it was extraordinarily dysfunctional, a family, between the booze and the drug issues, and it being the late 70s when I joined it. I joined it in 79. It was kind of a strange place in some respects because what was being seen on screen was oftentimes antithetical to what was happening in the sound stages.
Yeah.
But they were great people. I think, again, it was the tenor of the times that you had people telling you if you succeeded, and I'm lucky, man. I'm a social drinker at best. I came up in a family where, like many Irish families, the bane of the Irish is certainly running through the generations. I'm lucky that I didn't necessarily have a chemical addiction. I certainly think I have a lot of alcoholic behavior inclinations, codependency it would be, represented as, but there was extraordinary dysfunction behind the scenes. It was saddest in specific instances, and I guess I would jump ahead to 87 when we did the 8 is Enough reunion movie, and seeing what a mess Adam Rich's life had become, and sadly what a mess Adam was at that time. And this was a kid that when I joined the show, the immediate bond was Merle and Nicholas.
Right.
And I loved working with him. And I loved doing the Hawaii show, which we shot, within about 2 months of my joining the show. And I was carrying Adam all over Hawaii on my shoulders, and he had his parents and his younger brother with him. And I was with my wife, now my ex-wife, Kay, who's a very dear friend, I must stress. And, it was incredibly tragic, a state of affairs, to see what had become of Adam in particular.
Well, hey, pardon my ignorance on this. Is Adam still with us? Did he pass?
Yes, he is. He is.
Right.
Sadly,
Okay.
Those who are not would be first and foremost Lonnie O'Grady, who died, I believe it was about 10 days before her 47th birthday in late September of 2001. So, she lived long enough to see the horror of 9/11, but she didn't live long enough.
Who was Lonnie?
Less than a month later.
Is that Mary?
She played Mary.
Mary, okay.
Many people will most easily identify and say, "Oh, yeah, she's the doctor, the one with the deep voice."
Right. Yeah. What did she die of? Was it drug related?
I think it was ruled as an accidental overdose. And who can ever say? Lonnie knew that she had a history of use and abuse, and it wasn't a good thing. I know this. She had an incredibly kind heart, and I know I saw her almost exactly a year before she died when a few of us, it was Diane, Connie Needham, so they played Nancy, and Connie was Elizabeth. So Connie, Diane, Lonnie, and I, along with Dick Van Patten, did a show on, I think it was VH1, called The List. And Lonnie was her always exceptionally sweet self, but it was also very apparent she had become particularly needy. And I mean needy in the sense that, again, your ego takes a beating. Mm-hmm. It's a business that loves you like no one's ever going to love you again, baby, when things are going well. But when things stop going well, nobody answers the phone. Nobody has the time of day for you. Nobody, frankly, gives a damn. And I know that where Lonnie was living is, I believe, somewhat of a sad representation, because I didn't know her home, but I read and it might have been a very nice trailer, but she was living in some kind of a trailer home up in Santa Clarita, and this was, we're talking more than a decade ago. It wasn't nearly as developed as it is now, and I just have this terrible image of Lonnie, who loved people, being alone when whatever came to pass in her life prompted her to use and ultimately led to her demise.
Brian Patrick Clarke is our very special guest, actor Brian Patrick Clarke, and we're talking quite a bit about General Hospital and the work he did there, and 8 is Enough is another one of the extensive, the shows that he had extensive work on. As far as residuals, and I don't mean to get personal or too specific, but
Dude, if you're asking if I'll send you a couple of mine, let me tell you what, it ain't worth the postage in most instances.
Send it anyway. Well, it'd be interesting. But let me ask you this. You came in to the business for the most part after the residual situation was worked out.
Yes, thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Right.
I did. I'm the beneficiary of somebody else's forethought and, frankly, someone else's sacrifice. And I've got to stress that.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I have looked to the heavens and thanked God that somebody was looking after my retirement when, frankly, I became an actor at age 24. And though I was educated, I hadn't grown up with money, but I had a very good education, and I theoretically had the wherewithal to make a living, irrespective of whether it came to pass in front of a camera or not. I'm so grateful, forever grateful, to the people who were thinking about union protections. I am a devout union advocate, acolyte. I know it's really, really comforting to know that a man like I could be 62 years of age on August 1st, and that I could have 7 years ago gone to both my SAG and AFTRA pensions, and that may confuse some people because it became one union just over a year ago. But they actually were two entities. I have pensions in both, and they're not break-the-bank pensions, but they're going to provide me with a nice middle-class livelihood combined with Social Security. It's really comforting to know that I can afford to get older, and if I never work again, I never work again. And my wife and my son are taken care of. My older son has had great success. He and his wife alike, they've worked very hard for it. And
what do they do? What business is he
I so regret that this nation doesn't look after all of its aging population, and God knows there's enough of us in the baby boomers that I hear people denouncing unions, and there's no question, Detroit, they overextended themselves. The airlines, they overextended themselves. They had to go in. They had to take an additional look at these legacy costs. But, gang, if you think that living in a state like Florida with the right to work, which is basically fire at will, is the actual translation. If you think that that's a better solution, I'm sorry, I'm not on board with that one.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think a lot of people would agree with you. Obviously, there's extremes on both ends, and there's you could point to greed on both ends. But as far as this goes, I mean, you're involved in a very strong union. Actually, I mean, SAG is certainly has been a very, very good union. Who is your president? Is it still Melissa Gilbert?
Oh, no. And it hasn't been Melissa Gilbert in some time. Ken Howard was reelected, and frankly, he's been sensational. He's a fighter. He's a staunch advocate for the talent, and I think it was grossly overdue, and he was in the camp that, wanted a merger, and fortunately that, after years of frustration in the attempts to merge, and there were a host of considerations that made it a challenge, but he and his slate got it through, and it was a resounding victory. What was happening is more and more the two unions were being played against one another. I can't tell you how much work I've done that once upon a time would have been quote-unquote SAG. And the line of demarcation when I first got in the business was pretty simple. SAG was anything on film. Okay, if it's TV, if it's a film, a feature, it's film. And AFTRA covered American Federation Television Radio Artists, as you know. AFTRA covered radio and tape. So any of the shows like Daytime, for instance, that shot on tape, okay, that's AFTRA, and then you got SAG. Well, what happened is with this hybrid that came along, okay, you're no longer shooting to film. You're shooting to a cartridge. You're shooting to a cassette. And then in some instances, being transferred over to film to get the look of film. So what is it? Is it what it was shot as? Is it what it ultimately is distributed as? And you found, especially with the strike, which was horribly ill-advised, a few people had listened to me. We learned that in 1980.
Did you join in the strike?
I can't say I joined, but I think I got lucky because I wasn't in L.A. We'd already relocated to Orlando. And I guess theoretically I would have gone down. I would have picketed with the others, and, who cares? It wasn't going to change anything. The real power in the unions in Hollywood, you look at the Directors Guild, look at the Writers Guild, look at the Producers Guild. That's where power lies. You can't have power in a union like the Actors Union, where for a long time, I know this statistic was anywhere from 10 to 12% of the membership, and that, of course, doesn't include the people who would sell their mothers and sisters to become members. The membership was 10 to 12% actually made its living exclusively through the industry. So how can you possibly have power in an environment where basically 9 out of 10 people, if they get a chance to work, they're not really sitting there going, well, I don't want to violate union precepts. It's, when you've got numbers working against you, it's hard to play a winning hand. And the 80 strike episode was, I believed, a lesson learned. But then again, I believed that a war in which my brother served as a U.S. Marine in 68, 69, and that, of course, was Vietnam, I believe that was a lesson learned, and yet somehow we ended up in Iraq. Okay? Yeah. I'm not talking about Afghanistan, the people who actually did attack us. I'm talking about this foray of injudiciousness into a place that we still don't know what the ultimate toll is going to be, much less impact on human life. So, you think to Georgia Santayana's admonition that those who cannot learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat it, and we have seen this unfortunately played in more than a few instances, and I felt that the actors' strike was doomed to epic failure. There just wasn't enough power there.
Brian Patrick Clarke is our very special guest. He's a wonderful, regardless of what he says, he's a wonderful actor, and you've seen him on General Hospital for several years, and very popular character. He played Grant Putnam, and he played Merle the Pearl on 8 is Enough, who ended up being a very popular character in his own right.
You asked me originally, by the way, the original question was how many hours of General Hospital or how many episodes. I can only, because I gave you kind of a diffuse answer, and that was I was 109 into doing two characters in both shows, or both characters in a single show, is what I meant to say. I was 109 episodes in before we realized that they owed me a second payment for the additional characters. So the answer would be, in a nutshell, hundreds. I mean, literally hundreds in the course of about 3.5 years.
Oh, that is very interesting. Let me tie something. Here's a weird connection, right? Ken Howard, who you said now is the new president of SAG.
Well, he's the second-term president now. Yeah,
right. He's the current president. Here's a strange connection to your career. Ken Howard was in, and stop me if I'm wrong, was in The White Shadow. He was the coach.
Yes, he was.
And Tim Van Patten.
And I know where you're going with this, bro. I want to see if you go there correctly.
Let me see. Tim Van Patten. Played Salami. Now, Tim Van Patten is a wonderful director. He did Sopranos.
And extraordinarily
talented.
Recognized as such, absolutely.
Yeah. And Boardwalk Empire. In fact, my youngest son worked with him as an actor on the third episode ever of Boardwalk Empire.
Wow.
And he's a brilliant director.
He's supposed to be. I've never worked for him, but he's supposed to be, and very much an actor's director. But he can also do what television most demands. He can get the thing in on time.
Let me see if I get this correctly. He is the stepbrother of Dick Van Patten?
Outstanding.
How's that?
Outstanding. But he's actually a half-brother, I think. Isn't it a half-brother, or is it a stepbrother? I'm going to have to call upon your expertise. If you have the same father, but different mothers, is that stepbrother?
No, that's brother.
I think that's half-brother, isn't it?
No, that's brother. I mean, you may want.
Yeah. In other words, the only reason I'm somewhat familiar with it is because I've got two sons by two different women, and kind of sad, but very funny in its own way. The younger one, Sean, who turned, by the way, the day we're taping this, is his 16th birthday, so it's very exciting. And the older one, Carrie, is 17, 17. Yeah, 17. It was very quick. I mean, you wouldn't believe the movement back and forth between those two wives.
Yeah.
He's 17 and a half years older, is what I meant to say. He's 33. Yeah. But it was somewhat funny, but somewhat sad when he was around 5 or 6 years old, and the term half-brother had been used by someone in speaking about Carrie to Sean, our younger one.
Half-brother, that makes sense. To me, they're brothers, right? Those guys are brothers.
Absolutely. Right. And that's why Sean very forlornly looked at Kathy and goes, but don't I have a whole brother? Yeah. Yes, you do, buddy. Listen, he is your whole brother.
Yeah,
you needn't feel like he's been discounted.
Yeah, we don't believe in half brothers, but the stepbrother is if there's no relation. In other words,
exactly. Stepbrother would have been what, the Brady Bunch? I think wasn't that one married into the other, and the only thing he had 6.
Yeah, the only thing there is though when you get into adoption, then it's real, then everything's real. But the thing is that if for example John Doe's son has a son, and then he marries somebody else. The children of that somebody else would be his stepbrothers unless they all adopted. Then
oh my God, Frank, you're killing me, man. This is way too much thinking for my overtaxed mind. I'm thinking, okay, so John Doe, is he any relation to John Q. Public, or do I know this guy?
But for those who are just tuning in now for a very strange conversation,
very strange.
Yeah, Brian Patrick Clarke is our very special guest, and he is a wonderful actor, and you've seen him for years acting in many, many different things. Delta House, I guess that was an Animal House takeoff. Am I right?
Yes. It was a spin-off, and we had
who were you?
We had
you play?
Ivan Reitman as one of the exec producers, and Maddie Simmons from National Lampoon, and we actually had 4 of the actors reprising their roles. We had Jamie Widows as Hoover. We had John Vernon as Dean Wormer. And by the way, I don't have the hippie shakes. I actually am driving through the school parking lot. I promise I'm looking and driving really slowly, but every time I hit a speed bump, you're going to hear me go,
That's all right.
We had John Vernon, and then we had Stephen First playing Flounder, and okay, cool, young lady on crutches. Man, I'm sympathetic there. I'm an athlete. But we also had Bruce McGill playing D-Day. So we actually had 4 of the actors from the film. It was the bona fide spin-off. Again, I don't mean to minimize anyone else's ripoff, but CBS, I think, did a thing called Coed Fever, and NBC did a thing called Brothers and Sisters, and they all came on the air at the same time, and frankly, we were the enduring one because we went all of 13 weeks. I think what worked in Animal House, it was rather a challenge to put in network television in 1979, 78, originally went on the air. We went into production in 78. I think it was a challenge, much less doing so during the family hour.
Yeah.
That was at a time when 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock or 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock Central was respected as family viewing. And if you're trying to do a mazit, much less some of the other things they did in Animal House, you're fighting not an uphill battle. You're fighting an absolute slaughter. You're Custer at Bighorn.
Not gonna happen there, no doubt.
No,
Brian Patrick Clarke, we have about 3 minutes left with you. Let's talk about you now, what you're doing now, and how everything's going. Obviously, you got children. You're waiting outside.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm thrilled to be at the station I am in life. Every job I get, and I work maybe a couple of times a year. It would have been nice if the in-betweeners stuck because I enjoyed it immensely, and I did 5 of the 12 episodes and loved working with the people, but it didn't fly. Every job I get is gravy, Frank. Again, at this juncture in life, and it was 38 years ago, come August 1st, I arrived on my 24th birthday. Then I got to L.A., and once upon a time the dream was, oh my God, it'd be so cool if I could get a job in front of a camera. And then it was, man, it'd be really cool if I actually had some dialogue of consequence, and then if I had like really substantive stuff. And, you know, every element of that came to pass, came to fruition in multiples. So when I look back and I go, man, you get any work now. And I've been lucky enough, you know, the In-Betweeners was great fun. I've done 4 episodes of Drop Dead Diva. Ironically, I was supposed to do a 5th one last week, and they changed his shooting schedule, and I was halfway, not quite halfway, to Peachtree City, Georgia when I found out. So I got paid to not work.
Yeah.
I had to come back. My son was competing in the FSU relays, and I just said, guys, got to be there. So, you know, I've done a few films that, you know, went straight to DVD. I had a great time doing Ace Ventura Jr. for David Mickey Evans. David Mickey Evans is the gentleman who he sold his first screenplay coming out of Loyola Marymount for, at the time, record sum of $1.25 million, and it was the screenplay for Radio Flyer. He is most noted, and they had their 20th anniversary last year and did a tour of the country for the film The Sandlot, which he wrote and directed. I worked on Sydney White with Amanda Bynes and loved doing the film. I think it's a really entertaining.
How was she at that time? I mean, she's a...
You know, in all honesty, brother, she was a delight. She was a little bit guarded, but that's understandable. I think that she turned 21 right as we were finishing production. That was April of 2007. So how would you not be guarded when you're already, you know, so put upon by so many with such expectations? But I enjoyed working with her immensely. I found her very professional. I found her incredibly entertaining. I think she did a wonderful job in the film. I was nothing less than grief-stricken to read about what she was going through, and I thought, dear God, let's not lose another one. And I'm really heartened to hear that she apparently is doing better, and she's considering other career options, and she's, you know, I think she's dealing with mental illness. And let's face it, this is an epidemic in our society, and there's been a disinclination to identify and treat mental illness. But thank God times are changing, I believe.
No doubt about it. Brian Patrick Clarke has been our very special guest. We need a to be continued sign here, Brian, and listen, enjoy Florida, enjoy the kids down there, and I know you know, we failed to mention your wife is also a former gymnast, right? A Olympic athlete.
Yes, she is. She's a 2-time Olympian, did not get to compete in 1980 because of the Olympic boycott of Moscow, but in 84, when I must qualify it as this, she was literally more than 6 years older than the second oldest member of the team. She was a silver and bronze medalist in Los Angeles, and she continues. My wife is Kathy Johnson, now Kathy Johnson Clarke. Kathy is, you know, she was rather an icon, frankly, in her sport, and delightedly continues in the sport as a commentator with Bart Conner for the ESPN broadcasts of SEC's gymnastics and the NCAA championships each year. So I'm very lucky.
We've been speaking with Kathy Johnson Clarke, husband here.
Yes,
Brian Patrick
much better,
Clarke.
much better.
How's that? Well, listen, congratulations on all the success, and enjoy the kids and everything else. And let's get a part 2 in here one day.
I'd love to do it, Frank. I thank you so much for your interest in even a part one.
It's been a very, very interesting hour, and we will speak to you soon. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.